Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Just like to bring us back to our seventh address for day two. I'm pleased to welcome to the podium Professor Matthew O'Neill, who's a professor of communications in the University of Canberra's Faculty of Arts and Design and an honorary associate professor of sociology at the ANU, and he will be talking to us about reforming the curriculum to counter disinformation, toxicity, and polarization. Matthew, up to you.
Thank you. Yes, so really great to be here with some old colleagues and friends and new people that I haven't met before. So really glad to be here. So the reason I'm here is because I used to do a lot of work on online network analysis, particularly with Rob. He's already mentioned this yesterday. And so we did this work on this Twitter data set in 2016, and which basically sought to, sow division in Australian society and depress turnout. It doesn't work so well in a country where you have compulsory voting, but if you do it in a country where you don't, it might actually produce some results. This was in the lead up to the 2016 election. So the main output for that was a submission to a parliamentary committee, which we then published in a report that came out in 2020 called Australian Perspective on Misinformation. And, being in Canberra, we sort of get invited to the parent committees. So that's one of the advantages of being in Canberra. And I said at this committee hearing that every person in Australia, or every school kid at least, should have a few basic, skills to deal with information. And then I thought, well, I should actually try and do something about it. And I made some connections with people in the Faculty of Education, and that's how I came into this field. And Tanya has been working in this field for far longer than I. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to present a couple of ideas at the beginning, and then the project I've been running in schools, which sort of zeroes in on some of the stuff that Tanya's been talking about. I'll go into more detail about why we choose this approach and share with you some findings from the first proper implementation, which actually finished this week. So I've just got some of the results, but I can't really say much about them. For example, some of the comments to the survey, because we haven't really analyzed them or coded them or anything like that. So it's really very, very preliminary. So we haven't published a lot of peer-reviewed stuff. What we've done is we've focused on advocacy. My thinking was these methods are proven. They've been working in the US and Canada for a while. So what we really want to do is to convince people that they work. And so there's been mainly some reports. So the first one is the report on the first iteration, which was done in primary and secondary schools. Second one is a submission to a parliamentary committee. The third one is not by us, but it's some new think tank called AP4D. And they gathered a group of about 30 specialists, including myself and Tanya, and I don't think anybody else in this room. And then the last one is the submission from this year, and that sort of summarizes what we're doing at the moment, and that's going to come out next week. So, yeah. So basically, the idea is that we live in an information environment, and to have a democratic information environment, we need to have accurate information and to encourage shared understanding. So that's from the AP4D report. So some of the instances of disinformation or epistemic pollution that we've had in Australia are threats to public health by the spread of disinformation around COVID-19 vaccination, targeting of Australian public servants, for example, AEC staff, and then of course attempts to worsen religious and ethnic divisions in society and increase distrust in institutions. So, some of the results of that could be pretty bad. And then also there's a lot of more polarization and toxicity in society. So the way that interactions on social media are usually presented to get attention is so-and-so destroys the point of view of this other person or crushes the point, it's very adversarial. So there's an inability to engage with opposing viewpoints. And also, there's a lot of toxic masculinity or sexism. So people are, there's not much promotion of this idea that we should be working together collaboratively. So I'm trying to come up with a couple of ideas. So basically, there's three proposals in this presentation. They go from the completely ludicrous and pie in the sky to the more actual implementational ones. So you'll forgive me for doing that, but I just thought it's an opportunity to share some ideas and get some feedback. So there's a sort of global conflict at the moment between liberal democracy, representative democracy, bourgeois democracy, however you want to call it, in authoritarianism. A lot of it happens via repression in the authoritarian countries, but also via trying to influence discourse in liberal democratic societies. So there's also a war on fact-checking that's been happening. So the reason the Stanford Institute closed down or is not doing its work anymore is because they were hauled in front of Congress. I don't know if you know that, but they were sort of targeted. In Australia last year for the Voice referendum, there was also some attacks on fact-checking organization or on the legitimacy of fact-checking and saying, who are you to censor us? Kind of, this is another example of the elites trying to censor us. In the article there, the second article from Crikey actually talks about Tim, who was victim of some terrible harassment. Yes, so what I'm trying to say is the context that we operate in is not neutral, and we have to be careful about how we frame our efforts so that we're as inclusive as possible, and also that we preclude possibility of being criticized for partisanship. That's really important. That we try and have a reach that's as wide as possible. And so that kind of leads me to a point of distance with Tanya, is that I don't refer to what I'm doing as media literacy. I really focus on information literacy, and I'll explain why. Information literacy, as we use it, is just about a very simple question. Do I need to get more information about this? Do I need to, and how do I verify this claim, right? It's just about, is this correct or incorrect? Media literacy asks much more complex questions. Why am I seeing this message? What points of view have been excluded from it? What is highlighted, what is omitted? It's about power, basically. I mean, partly. So it could be seen as critical, which it is, but it could also be seen as, taking a particular partisan viewpoint, because one person's perspective could be another person's propaganda and so forth. And that's why when you're dealing with schools particularly, and very wide audiences, which include multiple stakeholders, you have to try and be, once again, as inclusive as possible. But I'll explain why I think this isn't such a big problem. It's more about having a preliminary kind of understanding that we can all share, which is what is correct, and then you can move on to more nuanced critiques of power. So we need effective and inclusive solutions. So I'm going to pose three points for the education system, 2 to do with values, and 1 with knowledge. So policy responses are not adequate. Tanya and Sora's and other people's report that came out in July or August, it shows that people have low levels of confidence, particularly older people. They have lower levels of confidence in their ability to tell what's true and what's not. Policymakers, so this is more from the AP4D report. Policymakers tend to see disorder in the information environment as a sort of social media issue, maybe not a structural crisis. Maybe they don't feel that they can do much about it in the face of these transnational corporations, and so there hasn't been a lot of response in terms of until the sort of misinformation bill, which is seen as problematic because of, once again, the censorship kind of critique. Also, the way This issue is addressed in Australia. It's sort of viewed as discrete issues that you separate. It's not a sort of holistic approach. Agencies don't share information. And when there is an integrated analysis, usually it's a task force, which doesn't last very long. You know, and there's no sort of kind of coordinated response. So how should we respond? So the first line of defense is citizens. They should be better equipped, of course. AP40 suggests to create a national body for the information environment that would sort of coordinate work across government. So what key skills, not messages, we shouldn't tell people, we shouldn't communicate campaigns, we should give them tools, right? And also what kind of educational response should there be? So this is my first one. So we've talked a lot about, you know, macho, Trump, etc. The problem with young men, you know, what are their role models? The feminist critique of patriarchy is necessary, but it kind of throws the baby out with the bathwater in a sense. So I know this is a little bit left field, but if we want to have some positive role models for young people, particularly young men, we should sort of use what works. So, you know, people like Andrew Tate, they have a lot of credibility. In Australia, young men or young boys, they look up to sports figures. And fighting is not something, you know, it's not for everybody, obviously, but it's just part of human experience. And rather than try and say you shouldn't do it at all, you shouldn't be interested in that sort of thing, you should try and channel it and understand that when you're training, what really matters is to be respectful. Like that's the key value in martial arts, is to, you know, not have conflict, diffuse conflict, be respectful. But if you do have conflict, then you're able to deal with it. So something that should maybe be considered, and I know this is, you know, but I have talked with parents of young people, and they say, yeah, that would be great, actually. So yeah, so martial arts training, maybe have some kind of elective or something, I don't know. Anyway, that's just an idea that I'm throwing out. In terms of collaborative values, I've been working for a long time on digital commons, free software, Wikipedia. And so what happens with these sort of projects is that the people who create them are usually the ones that are going to use it. So they're very lean, efficient kind of products because there's no extraneous stuff. There's what's known as the integrity of the process and the product, right? So they work really, really well. So free and open source software is now being used in all the technology that you've got there on your phones, in your computers. It's become the industry standard, and Wikipedia has become very important as well. So just to skip to the end of that, so the big thing about Wikipedia is a wiki is a website in which every change is archived, right? So if you go to the history page of a Wikipedia article, every modification is archived. So the knowledge production process is transparent and auditable. You can see exactly how it's happened. And also there's a talk page where people deliberate about the content. So it's really a great example of collaboration. There's an article that just came out recently which says, you know, the people who were not scientific left, and then early on, because they couldn't prove what they were saying. So only the people who believed in the scientific facts stayed. So Wikipedia was defined as the last good place on the internet, which is a nice way to put it. There's very strict editorial policies, neutrality, reliability, notability. Thousands of people enforce these policies. Amy Bruckman, who wrote a book in 22, said Wikipedia might be the most reliable information source ever created. So obviously, if a page is on a very, very obscure topic, there's less editorial oversight. There might be hoaxes, there might be rubbish, but I'm not saying trust Wikipedia completely. I'm just saying people should increase their Wikipedia literacy, recognize when an article is not reliable, There's no references, there's a warning banner, etc. So we've done quite a lot of advocacy for Wikipedia through outlets like The Conversation. There's an article, I was interviewed for this article in the Fairfax papers a couple of years ago, which said evidence suggests Wikipedia is accurate and reliable. When are we going to start taking it seriously? There's all these references to medical science articles that compared the professional literature on oncology or whatever with the Wikipedia articles, and they're very high quality. The reason for that is if you want to argue in a scientific article on Wikipedia, you have to know what you found out very easily. It's not the same, for example, on popular culture or history. I mean, there's, when there's less barriers to entry, the quality might decline a little bit. But for scientific articles, the people who edit them are specialists and they make sure they're fine. There's also been some attacks. So this ISD report that came out in 22, there was a very sophisticated information operation where about 89 accounts started editing on non-controversial topics to build their kind of credibility. And then they started working on the Ukraine and try to orient them towards more pro-Russian perspectives. And then also editors in Belarus and Russia have been arrested. So it needs to be supported. So yeah, so basically Wikipedia should be recognized as a really important resource, should be included in the World Heritage List, I think. The first selection of the heritage, the UNESCO's World Heritage, is that it's a masterpiece of the human creative genius. And I think we can all agree that Wikipedia is that. And yeah, the second one is, if you release all the information, your particular intelligence operations won't be affected. So I think that would be nice if the intelligence services could help a little bit as well. Okay, so the main part of this presentation is about the civic information literacy skills. So the two principles that we operate on is, first of all, effectiveness. And there's a really great quote by Dario Taraborelli. The larger the amount of potentially relevant but weakly authoritative information, the more urgent is the need for effective and cognitively viable information processing skills. So cognitively effective means that you have to deal with information overabundance, right? So we just cannot afford to spend hours working things out when we're not sure of the quality of the information that we encounter. And the second one is what I already mentioned. We should try and be completely waterproof when it comes to accusations of partisanship. There's a lot of stuff I've taken out, there's a lot of games you can use, there's a lot of literature. One of the best known resources is the Debunking Handbook, which was meant to deal with climate change skeptics. And so some of the information they provided, this is the 2011 edition. They took out all this stuff at the bottom because this is what's known as the backfire effect. And it's a bit controversial in psychology. It hasn't really been proven. It's the idea that if you foreground a myth and then you give a lot of detail, people will remember the stuff that's been foregrounded, right? Or if you give too much information, then people will only remember what they know. That's a little bit controversial. It hasn't been completely proven. But some of the other parts are not controversial. For example, presenting visual information is much more effective than text. So the top image is 97 out of 100 climate scientists think that climate change is human-induced and real. 3 don't. So that's very clear graphic. And if you're going to present a myth to somebody, warn them that you're going to do it. So don't just give it to them. You always have to warn them that it's coming. So sort of really basic common sense things, but it's good to remember that. There's a lot of psychology research about misinformation. Here's an article which sort of reviews a lot of them. So I just thought it would be a good summary. You probably can't see it from here, but we've talked about some of them yesterday with Lee's presentation and other people. So accuracy prompts, friction, so increasing, like don't click on this link unless you've read the article. Social norms, it's better to have belief in things that are true. Inoculation, AKA pre-bunking. So, giving some ideas in advance about what you might encounter. For example, the US, before the invasion of Ukraine, they released some information saying the Russians are probably going to say this and this. Lateral reading, that's the one we use. Media literacy tips, and then debunking and labels. But there's others. So there's a lot of course, one of the issues with the psychology literature is that they mainly use experiments to test, and so they don't account for differences in competencies between people, or differences in access or digital exclusion, or all sorts of things like that. So, okay. Now, this article came out a couple of years ago, and it's sort of like a super team. There's Kozireva, who we already saw. There's Sam Weinberg from Stanford, Lewandowski, who's one of the authors of the Debunking Handbook, who's published an enormous amount. And they sort of said, what we need now is not critical thinking, it's critical ignoring, is what to ignore, what to not engage with. There's too much information, we need to know what not to engage with. So there's three types of information they talk about. The first one is distracting and low quality. So this is about how you relate to your information environment. I'm not really going to talk about it. The third one, you can't see it because of the Zoom thing, is don't feed the trolls. Self-explanatory. People who seek your attention, don't waste time with them. Just report them if they're beyond the guidelines. Second one is improving judgments of information credibility. So lateral reading. So what lateral reading, and Tanya already talked a little bit about it this morning. It means you don't read deeply, critically, you don't engage, you don't look at the about page, don't try and figure it out. You look to the side laterally, do a search, and you verify what the information environment or credible sources say about the claim or about the claimant. And if it's not worth your time, then you just move on. So that's the key. Improving assessments of information credibility. So what's used in schools, unfortunately, is the very opposite. They teach methods using a checklist approach. So the first one is called CRAP. It's an actual thing. Is it current, relevant, authoritative, accurate, and what is its purpose? In the UK, this is a program that was done by some academics, 23, with The Guardian. It's called Newswire, same thing, checklist, right? So is it fake? Have you heard about it? Is it biased? Is it, da 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 da? Okay, what's the problem with that? First of all, it's very slow, takes a long time. Second of all, it's overwhelming cognitively. So there's too many things to think about. And so what happens is that people often just latch onto the most obvious thing. It's a .org, not a .com. It must be better, that sort of thing. So it doesn't really work. It's not effective. So, but unfortunately, it's still used in a lot of schools. So what we've done is we've tried to apply lateral reading to schools, thanks to a program that the University of Canberra has with the ACT Education Directorate. And so it's called the Affiliated Schools Research Program. So basically, researchers team up with teachers or teacher librarians, and we co-develop kind of resources or research. So we did it in 22. It was a bit tough. There were still COVID problems. Some of the teachers dropped out. We didn't get a lot of responses. And basically, we started with this metaphor of street sandwich. If you find a sandwich on the street, would you eat it? Same thing with information. Would you, and that was to introduce this idea of lateral reading. You don't just take things at face value, you check. Then Why Are You So Mad? This is about emotional manipulation. Red Cars was about ubiquity. Just because you see something, it could be an illusion. The Garage Dragon is a story from astrophysicist called Carl Sagan, when somebody says, there's a dragon in my garage. Great, let's go and see it. Oh, it's empty. No, it's actually invisible. Oh, well, let's put some flour so we'll see its traces on the floor. No, it's floating. And they keep, so it's about evidence. And then we had to add these two at the beginning because we realized the teachers themselves needed a bit of a, reminder. How do we know what we know? So, the scientific process, and then Wikipedia, because particularly Wikipedia is a big problem in schools with teachers. So we did that, and each lesson had some slides, and we also did some videos, which are available on Vimeo for some of the lessons. So that was in 22. So the big findings from that was that, yeah, a lot of distrust of Wikipedia in the teaching community. Critical and creative thinking is a general capability in the curriculum, but evaluating the veracity of online claims is not really addressed very much. And there's a huge discrepancy between traditional critical thinking, which is about thinking intertextually, logically, having a curious mindset, and digital civic information literacy, which has to be quick, and which is you should use when information is overabundant. And what we also found was that teacher librarians were great allies. They get it, they deal with information literacy. They were not afraid of Wikipedia. And so we decided when we were going to do this again, we were going to target teacher librarians. We also came up with some principles which were published in the report in 23. Part of it is about information health, because part of it was done with Rob. We tried to develop some metrics to what a healthy, quote unquote, information environment would be online. So, you know, how open it was, how diverse it was, you know, whether it was just one side partisan or mixed. And so that gives you an idea of whether it's an echo chamber where people just talk amongst themselves or whether it's more diverse. So, but I'm not really talking about that today. So I'm just explaining why it talks about information health. But the three principles are nonpartisanship, speed, and transparency, which I haven't really talked about yet. But basically, transparency is important because it's the opposite of conspiracy. So conspiratorial thinking is always saying there's a secret cabal, you know, working in the dark. And transparency is the antidote to that. So, you know, that's why Wikipedia is so great, because it's completely transparent and auditable. Okay, so the second iteration was done in, this year, in 2 high schools with teacher librarians. So we've developed our own resources, but we also use existing resources. So for example, at the top right, there's a video about emotional manipulation, which is done by Sander van Linden in Cambridge. And at the bottom, this is some of the stuff that the Stanford people have been doing. So they ran an experiment where they asked 3 different groups. I think Tanya alluded to it this morning, and they said, here are 2 websites. You know, there's the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Pediatricians, and which one is the most reliable? And one of them is a professional organization with 70,000 people. It's been around since the 30s. It's well recognized. And the other one is basically a hate group against gay parents with 500 members. And the 3 groups, the Stanford students and the professional historians, they got it wrong. Or they even said the hate group was better, was more reliable. Whereas the professional fact checkers just looked, you know, didn't go deep, looked to the side, did a search, and bang, they knew in seconds which was which, right? So it actually works. But then the question is, how do you implement it? So we've done some videos as well. I don't really.
Wikipedia reliable? How can we check if something is real or true? Where can we find sources of information we can trust?
I don't really have time, but you can, this is a new version. So all we did is, in the older version, the kids look younger, and now you can just change the characters. I mean, they're pretty basic videos, but they're sort of useful to break up the classes. Okay, so all of what I'm telling you is stuff that other people have done and developed. The one innovation really in terms of concepts is that we say you should basically have an audit of what kind of environment you're in. What's your information environment? Are you in an information environment where you have epistemic certainty? For example, in the library, looking at peer-reviewed sources, facts are distinct from opinions, right? Whereas if you're not, if you're on the web, social media, or TV, evidence can be falsified, facts or opinions pretending to be facts you don't know. So from there, you choose how you're going to read, right? So if you read vertically in B, you could be wasting your time. So if you're not sure in B, in epistemic uncertainty, then you should read laterally. Look to the side, and you protect your attention that way. And then where do you check? Well, trusted sources. So what are trusted sources? So an encyclopedia, Britannica, Macquarie, experts compile evidence, editors check, it's restricted access, Wikipedia, volunteers update content based on rules, admins ban vandals, and it's open access. And then other trusted sources have a record of evidence-based reporting, transparency, blah, blah, blah. And finally, a little bit of pre-bunking. So I was always reminded that, you know, pre-bunking could be dodgy if you talk about actual topics. So this is more about a method, right, which is emotional manipulation. So when somebody tries to manipulate others by using emotional triggers, use of music, use of words. So we've got a lot of material for that. You know, we use like animal cruelty video or an ADF recruitment, you know, which is very exciting, and what kind of emotion they're trying to make you feel, and et cetera, et cetera. It actually is going to be on TV. There was on Wednesday before coming here, there was an ABC TV crew that came to the college and shot the kids, not shot the kids, but, you know, took video of the kids. That was emotional manipulation in action. And so hopefully they'll come out in the next few days. Yeah, so why are they trying to make you angry? Just sort of think about it. Yeah, so what kind of data do we have? So the pre-test and post-test activity survey is available. The comments is, we haven't looked at them yet. And also the teacher librarians made notes about how it was going, you know, what the reactions were, how they, you know, so we haven't analyzed any of that. Like I said, it literally finished yesterday. So the pre-test, we gave them an article about ray gun, the breakdown. So that was basically a msn.com article with just claims based on tweets. And then these two tweets saying, look, this is a park, all the rubbish was left by Extinction Rebellion, so much for the environment, blah, blah, blah. And so we asked them, you know, are these credible sources of information, and why? And the result was that, so there's about 140 students, I think. So 22% said the article on ray gun was reliable, and 28% said the post present valid evidence about Extinction Rebellion. So that's pretty high, I think, the 28% particularly, you know, like, there's no reason to say that. So then we did the lessons. So we had posters, big posters, and a lot of other resources made up. So step 1, the environment. Step 2, choose between vertical and lateral reading. Step 3, the trusted sources. Step 4, why you so mad. Poster that puts all of them together. Then we did the post-test last couple of weeks. So this is just stolen from an article, borrowed from an article by some of the Stanford people. You know, these flowers were found in Fukushima. You know, is this a valid claim? That was on a IMGUR in, how do you say that, Tim? IMGUR? I don't know. So it's a photo sharing site. I don't know. Yeah. IMGUR, okay. And then this second one is you're researching a science issue and come across this website, ACHS, please decide if this website is a trustworthy source of information on health and science issues. And so this is a, you know, fake science sort of website, right? So the problem is we've been using Google surveys. And the way this survey is set up is that, you know, there's 5 groups every week. They do the survey, and then it just accumulates, right? So you don't separate them. They all become part of the same survey. So I've just been documenting it. You know, the first 2 on Tuesday 29th, you could see they were a smart bunch. Only 8% said the Fukushima was reliable, and question 2, 20% said the website was reliable. Then when we went to the Wednesday groups, the photo evidence went to 15%, and the science website went to 30%, and basically it stayed around 15, 32, 30, went down a bit on Wednesday, the 6th of November. And then finally yesterday, the final results for the whole cohort is 15%. So we've improved their, photo evidence capacity, but in terms of the other one, 33%. And I'll just show you really just like brutal copy paste, just a selection. Website names they have a bit odd. So one of them says, according to a plethora of other sources, this site commonly spreads misinformation. But many of them just looked at surface characteristics or looked at the website itself, right? Like the last one says, it says they are against fighting junk. It's a government website. It has to be regulated, checked by us. So it's not a government website, but So now, why did they do that? Well, first of all, we did, contrary to Tanya and co, we didn't say to them, you can check in other websites, and if you do, make sure to use it as like a sort of raving flag. But I thought, that would be that would skew. But I think, in fact, we were wrong, so we might very well change that for the next time. And Tanya threatened me with, verbal violence yesterday if I made any wanton generalizations, but I'm going to do it anyway. First of all, I think this actually contradicts very deep fundamental ideas about how we engage with reality, which is that we can work things out logically, and so maybe in year 11 at the age of 17 it's too late. And you've already been doing that for such a long time. So it actually, the teacher librarians actually agree, and they think this should be done at an earlier age. When you start engaging with social media, 12, 13, 14, that's when you should actually, maybe even earlier. But, it shouldn't just be done. I mean, obviously, we didn't do it in the best way, number one. But number two, if it's just one drop in the ocean of everything else you've been told, how could you possibly change your thinking? So I think it's important that, we do this and we try it again at other ages and so forth. So yeah, so we sort of, another issue with all this, of course, is that the curriculum is decided in Australia at the federal level by the Australian Curriculum Authority, ACARA, but it's implemented locally by states, territories, private, public schools. So there's huge variations in how this is done. So we came up with this idea for a national certificate. Everybody has to do it, or micro-credential. And yeah, so libraries, once again, like Tanya's group, they're very important sites, even, for digital inclusion, including for digital inclusion. So for the submission to Parliament, we also collaborated with Holger Heppner through this same project that I'm doing with Rob and Tim on bots building bridges on online deliberation. And Holger Heppner's a psychologist, and we sort of found common ground in terms of how we respond to hate speech. So we thought, people who curate information environments like Reddit editors or Wikipedia, or Reddit moderators or Wikipedia editors, they need some support. So how would you actually deal with hate speech? First of all, you have to assess it, and then you decide what kind of approach you take. And so we put all of this together as a sort of thing, first information literacy tools, and then counter speech tools, and like a suite of tools that people could be taught or communicate in some ways. What's next? I think I should stop, right? Yeah. It's okay. Oh, yeah, I can't. So different ways to do that through public campaigns, through developing of toolkits and resources, etc. The report, which puts all of this plus the, it's a bit self-indulgent, but I thought it was quite a good conversation, and it went on for quite a long time. I appeared in front of the committee, so I'm actually pirated hand-sided and putting in the report as an appendix. So you can have that. That'll come out next week. Okay, so what do we want to do next? So what I'm hoping from this session is to get some feedback about my four moves. If you think you see any things wrong with them, the pre-bunking could go at the beginning, maybe, we could play around with it. Because what I want to do is translate it into all these different languages, put the four very basic, non-partisan tools in the 12 most used languages. It sounds a bit crazy, but so, you know, English, Mandarin Chinese, Hindi, and just do a very basic website based on Wikipedia, actually. So Wikipedia, that's what it looks like. You know, you have the first page, you click on the top, you get the menu for Wikipedia, and then if you click on another menu, you get a menu for the page. So we'd sort of base it on that, and we'd have every page would have the posters and then a few other resources. Most of it would be empty shells for the moment, but you know, hopefully we can build it over time with people from different countries, etc. Just to have a sort of common tool to deal with information environments. So that's what we're starting to build now. So thank you very much.
Back to the slide just there, and the lesson one I could actually really put it. Lesson. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Oh, you're blocking it. Sorry. I'm really fascinated. So my background is as a teacher and then a librarian, and now at university. What made you decide that workflow for the library environment? Given, you know, a lot of studies suggest that scientists lie to fake data, economic models support quantitative measures for citations, which means peer review processes can be flawed. So I'm fascinated by you would pick one method for the library environment versus web socials, and would the workflow actually, for the web socials, actually also be helpful for the library environment?
Well, you know, we're not looking at research on vaccines or stuff that's contested. We're looking at 95% of the evidence, which is fixed and historical. And it's more about, it's more about on average, are you more likely to find correct information in a peer-reviewed article in a database or on a TikTok video? And I think I'm going to go with peer-reviewed articles on TikTok. But yeah, I guess that was what I was thinking. It's more about, it's not so much about you know, boosting the library. It's more about introducing that moment of, hold on, I need to check. How do you get people to make that decision? And so this is a sort of heuristic to do that, is to say, in that environment, just hold on, you know? Whereas, because otherwise, why would you have that fact-checking reflex, you know? It's not a natural thing. Like we're conditioned to just sort of consume information as it comes, right? So it's more about introducing that sort of, yeah, that's the way we thought about it.
In much of Australia, and perhaps not Canberra, there's a specific problem, being that the impoverished state schools, the principals in charge of budgets, frequently dump teacher librarians so they can get another main subject teacher. There's not an actual in-department requirement in every school to have teacher librarians.
No, that's true.
It's a question of that should be the next step. The state in-departments require every school, every high school at least, has a teacher librarian.
No, that's a great point. There have been, I mean, I can't give you exact figures, but I have been told that the number of positions is being cut. Also, they have no power in the school. So you're really dealing with a situation where in some cases they have to try and find a way to get into the teaching programs, because otherwise there's just no in. But that depends. Like in Dixon College, they had a sort of transitions program which they ran, and this was really popular. And a lot of the teachers came and sat in on the lessons and were really interested and want to do it. So it's once again, it's a sort of it's very contingent on the local situation, and it varies a lot. And you know, that's what we're trying to think through a way to make it more consistent, because it's such a fundamental issue now when you're dealing with information overabundance that we need kind of, you know, consistency in how people deal with it. So there was Tanya raised her hand. Sorry.
Just sorry, I want to check that what years was the
In this one, year 11. Yeah, year 11. And the first time was we had year 4, year 5, and year 6. But the year 4 teacher dropped out because she said it was too complex for her kids.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, that's what I heard him say, oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
yeah. So, but you know, we had 4 classes. One teacher said, I can't do it because it's too hard. Another teacher said, I can't do it because my life is too complicated. So we ended up with, but then we got another teacher librarian who joined in. So, but it was a bit a bit kind of not consistent. This is a much more consistent one because the teacher librarians, they knew about lateral reading. They were already using it. They were already on board. You know, we didn't have to convince them of the validity of our approach, which is exactly what we had to do with the teachers. I mean, they were okay. And we also ran, I should have said, we also ran some workshops with other teachers and teacher librarians from the ACT. We had about 15 teacher librarians and teachers come in, and they all had the same, reaction. It's what the hell, and then Wikipedia, what, and then okay, yeah, that's good. So it's just about presenting the information. But the other point of friction is teacher education, which is where the teachers learn, pre-service teachers. And so we've tried to do a little bit of information literacy at the Faculty of Education, but once again, it's really dependent on the one person doing it, etc. But that's where there needs to be also a kind of understanding of, that.
And so just one, was it 4 lessons delivered over 4 weeks? Like that?
Which one? This one? Yeah. 4 lessons for like 45, 50 minutes each with the teacher librarians and also a teacher. So the teacher librarians would come into the class and the teacher is there, but they let them do the thing. And yeah, normally I would have shown you slides from what we did, but I just didn't have a chance to sort of copy paste them into the thing. But there was different activities, discussions, watching video, talking about it. Where do you get your news from? Why did you I mean, all sorts of activities that we did. So questionnaires sometimes, different things. So it's good. It was really this one. The first time we did it, it was us sort of coming up with 95% of the ideas. This time we really developed it together with the teacher librarians, and it was fantastic because they could say right away, this is going to work, this isn't going to work. And so I'm very, very pleased with the way it turned out. Really co-designers.
So am I right that there's like an intervention that you've got? You tested it with firstly it was the ray gun. It was one of the posts, and then there was another one. Then there was the intervention, which is these 4 lessons. Right, and then you're doing a post test, and that data is still coming in, and then you were showing snapshots of as it's being updated in terms of. And did it look like that actually on one of the posts, that they're actually doing worse than they did pre-test? Is that what you said?
Yeah, look.
But that one on the right.
Yeah. So the second question about the science website, it wasn't. They did worse in some ways. Yeah, I mean not group. 20%. So they were the first 2 groups. Sorry, I should say on the Tuesday. So that's about 34. I don't know how many they were in that. There were less people doing the post-test than the pre-test. That's the other thing. So we might have to do some adjustment. But yeah, so the results were not great for the second one. But I think it's.
What's the difference between 2 examples on the left and the right? Like it's a different type of. One's got an image and the other one's purely text.
No. The first one was just: is this image? Is this photo evidence? Is this reliable evidence? Does it provide strong evidence about the conditions near the Fukushima plant? And the second one was about this website. Is this website a trustworthy source for learning about science and health? This website is not a trustworthy source, so they just had to evaluate this website.
And how come you didn't use the same questions like for?
What do you mean?
Well, you kind of the pre-test, you've got pre-test and post-test, and then you've got different questions. I know you can't ask the same question.
Well, they're very similar.
Yeah.
The first one is, this article is a reliable source of information about Rego. So saying the website is a reliable source of information about science.
You're saying that they're kind of equivalent.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you couldn't be too close, otherwise it would remind, you know.
No, I'm not saying you can't do the same questions.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, why didn't you have like everyone's getting, all the students are getting, there's interventions with all the students. I guess I'm wondering why there wasn't like a holdout group, if you know, where like there's all they're all treatment groups rather than.
You mean a control group,
Yeah.
which didn't do the thing?
Just leave them alone, let them kind of, yeah.
You mean we ask them the question, but we don't do the intervention?
Yeah.
Well, that would be hard to sell to the
The
principal of the school.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no, you'd probably need one. But because this is the first time we did it in that school, and you know, we try to promote that this is actually going to be good for the students.
Yeah, it's
So-
a useful.
I think the only way you can do it is if they're gonna get the treatment later.
Yeah.
They'll do this test and they're gonna, yeah. And they're still gonna get it.
They're gonna get it eventually,
Yeah.
later on,
Yeah.
so that could work that way.
Yeah, if we, you know, at that point we were just doing it, and we're not sure if we're going to do it again, so we couldn't really say that. So
Because there is a change in the media as well as social media.
you're supposed to sort of put your hand up to the chair normally, but
The change is that, you know, all writing is now byline writing with an opinion, an attempt to get clickbait. So if that article comes from the Australian or another Murdoch paper, we're going to have some idea about what game is playing. So that is the change. The conventional media also is full of
sorry, I'm trying to block out the.
opinion articles.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah,
Not
but
just social media.
yeah, well, I suppose, yeah. But, okay.
I'm just saying for others, just let someone ask the question.
What should we do, Chair? Should we let them talk, or should you wrap their fingers?
So,
Yes, I'd like to wrap it.
So
Can we
just-
just have some people, this is one at a time.
Yeah.
Answer the question first. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, yeah, Rob.
Yeah, so you're forging ahead with the translations, even though at this stage you're not so sure that the interventions worked.
Well, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of evidence coming from the US and Canada
Yeah.
that, and it's, you know, intuitively, I don't see any other method that would be as useful. But there's been, like, you know, the Stanford people, Weinberg, Breakstone, Sarah McGrew, and then there's a Canadian initiative called Control FX or something like that. They've been doing it as well. The woman in New York called Brodsky, she's been doing it. So there's a lot of evidence that it does improve people's ability to assess the credibility of information. So, you know, there are so many questions about it, whether it should be done, you know, as part of civics education, should it be done as part of science education, should it be, you know, where should it sit in the curriculum? That's the problem with the curriculum. It's overstuffed, extremely abstract. They have these general capabilities that are then, you know, kind of try to filter down into what they actually teach. It's, you know, the teachers are super stressed.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we're just trying to sort of really trying to put it into the national conversation, I think, as well.
Sorry.
No, you could, yeah.
I was gonna ask, did you consider, or what were the thinking of solution to it, of not just using the civic online learning form, which is like available on a framework? There are thinking behind that you drawn. The other thing is when they do their testing, they're not testing the investment market, they're testing the how they can.
Yeah, well, we give them, like, it doesn't show it there, but there's a comment. There's a comment after explain it. So they they don't, it's like they, how can I explain? They don't get a mark, but they get a credit or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not a, it's like something that counts as part of their education, but they're not assessed like through an exam. No, well, there's a comment box where it says explain your reasoning in a few words, and so every answer has to come with the question. So we have all those comments as well. Yeah.
I'm just saying that they didn't do the scoring with the yes, essentially yes or no question. Their scoring is only that part of the book.
Their scoring mean.
They're saying yes, a student was able to do this. When they say that, and then they're able to explain the process.
Oh, they're not. I don't think they get a score. They just get a score for doing the unit. You know, for doing the.
Well, I was talking about the pre, but ultimately there are people giving a score for the process, giving a score for the process, and saying did something change.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. We're also going to code the comments,
yeah.
Saying, you know, how do they explain it? They give no consideration to, you know, do they only look at the surface levels? Do they think about something else? Do they actually provide an explanation? You know, there's, yeah, no, we've got a coding scheme, but we haven't had, it's just happened this week, so we haven't done it yet.
No,
yeah, no, it'd be great. Yeah, sorry.
What I'm thinking is that everybody does English, and when the Australian curriculum was rolled out, it was a requirement to embed inquiry-based projects where students have a problem that they have to work through that inquiry model. And I think if you connected this with that, that would work really nicely. Because by year 11, you know, it's difficult to type in curriculum and people, I mean, in Victoria we do ECU, I'm sure that's called in Canberra, but yeah, and I've run similar with year 7 level students, and I think the inquiry-based learning model would connect really nicely. But I feel like you may have to relook at that lesson 1, because the idea that facts are unbiased doesn't align with inquiry-based method of learning, and that's done from year 7 right way up every English curriculum in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something that you should just do once. You know, it should something that you should do once and then have a reminder. You know, it should actually be embedded across the curriculum, but you know, we'll see. Things are starting to change a little bit. So, yep.
Just one last question about with the results of this Google Docs that we're updating with the pie charts. That says new classes are undertaking the test. Like, yeah, so it's like blocks of students. They all do it in the class at the time. So different classes are doing it at different times.
Yeah, it just adds to the existing survey. So
when you first started talking about it, I was thinking that students were actually doing the post-test in their own time.
No.
I'm going to have all sorts of questions.
No. They are just like there were 10 minutes at the end of the class where they have to do the post test. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, obviously they had to do a consent form. We had to do ethics through us.
Yeah.
And there was all sorts of, you know, but the question is, would it be better to sort of have all sorts of separate surveys so we could drill more into the different groups?
Yeah.
Because at this point, you know, it kind of becomes one huge block.
Yeah.
And we can't really tell, you know, which ones are doing, but that's not the point of it. But it's pretty striking that the first group, they were, you know, down to 8%, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, because when I first saw that, like the first group did really well, and then it got progressively worse.
I know.
And I was thinking, oh, that's because they're the keen ones.
Yeah, I thought so too, but I don't know. That's just a general assumption about life. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
So I appreciated in the beginning of your presentation, you talked also about some offline components when you were referencing martial arts things. So I'm wondering if you can kind of bring the two together in terms of how you see kind of offline, online interventions.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I did this presentation, an earlier version of this presentation. I actually got ChatGPT or Copilot to do some posters of lateral reading in a Muay Thai style. So it's like, you know, defeat disinformation. I mean, they looked horrible, the images, but yeah, look, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I actually have been talking to one of the Muay Thai gyms in Canberra, and I was hoping to do some kind of intervention ahead of the ACT election that happened last month in Canberra, where we could maybe have some flyers or posters. But I thought, you know, posters, these posters, Muay Thai style, would look really cool, you know, with the sort of fire letters and all that stuff, you know, get people's attention. Just to try and reach populations that you don't normally reach. But it didn't happen. You know, we just didn't get a chance to get to it. But yeah, I think, you know, we have to try and reach people where they are in ways that connect with them. So that would be one option. But yeah, I haven't really had a chance to think about it much more than that. Another idea we had was to, once this is done, which it is now, is to get the students to do some TikTok videos that would illustrate this. So get them to generate content that we can then share, and you know, vote on the best one or whatever, and have it on the website. So that's another thing we've been thinking about doing, is to try and, you know, get some sort of crowd engagement like that, and maybe get the message out through people doing it themselves, because people might think it was sort of cool or whatever. So there's different strategies, but we haven't had you know, we're just in the middle of it. So yeah.
I mean, it's been interesting in this presentation. So just coming from the kind of space where I work a lot in the extremism studies, we just out of a big conference taking a look at some of the stuff, and the parallels in the intervention are striking. I think your presentation highlighted it. One, in terms of, you know, the issues around the educational setting, both in terms of the teacher resources and capacity and capability, but also the importance around co-design and with the educators themselves, but also co-design in terms of the individuals and the cohorts that you're trying to intervene with, you know, just like your TikTok example kind of came up. And another thing I really appreciated as well too is in your presentation you highlighted not just content but the environment, so the ecology around all of this is really, really important, and that's something we should take a look at in the extremism space. We always focus on kind of on the individual intervention, but less so much on the place or the environment and the ecology about how all of that interacts. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
And also highlighting the because, yeah, I think that's one that people don't highlight it enough. Was one of the things that we took a look at in the Digital Threats to Democracy project. They were looking at it and highlighting Wikipedia as, yeah, it has this problematic reputation, but it is actually a good example of disseminatory, deliberative type of information.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of teachers are sort of stuck in 2010 when it was still, you know, emerging and not completely reliable, I suppose. But it's just striking that every time you sort of explain, well, actually, there's a whole community and there's a whole bureaucracy essentially that's emerged organically, and that has created the system of governance and these rules, and they apply them ruthlessly. And they said, really, I have no clue about that. You know, that's really like, you know, oh, the veil, the matrix of, you know, we're seeing the reality like differently. That happens so many times. It's really weird. I just don't understand how come it's not better known, because everybody uses it, you know, and
It's like, sorry, you know, university students teach business class and students, yeah, and that's university students, and so it's like, and it's anyone can manage it, it's like, oh, is anyone getting it? Just no one's ever edited it. So I do think, you know, interventions where people get their hands dirty and have an experience, will be quite critical, and then try and change the attitude, which can you all remember, it's just like a big joke in media, right? Oh, what does it say about little people that are all, that was the media discourse for such a long time.
yeah. I mean, the media discourse, and there's a book that was published in 2022 or 2021 to celebrate the 20 years of Wikipedia. And there was an article that was about the media, how the media representation of Wikipedia has evolved a lot. And, you know, it started off being very critical of the process. And then there was a lot of critiques of, you know, around 2014, it started to be more about gender inequality. Like somebody said yesterday, I think maybe Tim, there are some issues with gender in Wikipedia, right? So not just about the number of articles, but there was a study by some German scientists in 2015 that looked at how women were the kind of terms that were used for women in Wikipedia, and their marital status was mentioned 4 times more than for men. Like, so, you know, what we say is, you know, Wikipedia is a reflection of the world that we are in. And unfortunately, the world is still pretty patriarchal. So, but there's projects like, I can't remember, but Wiki Education or Wikimedia for Education project or something. They actually work specifically on producing more female positive content on Wikipedia. So there's, you know, people are conscious of that and it's changing. But then after 2016 and Brexit and Trump, then Wikipedia started becoming much more positively represented in the media, and it was seen as the last bastion of decency and truth on the internet, you know. So there was this really interesting evolution from it's shit to, oh, there's issues, and then to finally, oh my God, you know, we should cherish it. So yeah. But yeah, a lot of teachers still don't want to use it. I think they're worried that students are, I mean, maybe now that AI is there, they'll start relaxing a bit, because I think a lot of them were worried that the students were going to copy paste from it, or they thought they were going to cite it. And we'll say you never cite an encyclopedia, obviously. You look to the references at the end. It's just a good, useful first stop for a quick fact check, which is what fact checkers use anyway. Yeah. I know that this is a terrible time to be presenting because everybody's just eating, you're all digesting. Oh my God, she's like another. I can see the glazed looks.
The online, the participants feel free to jump in.
Oh yeah, are there any, I don't know, I don't have this. Yeah.
Are you going to create common licenses? So it's open access?
Yeah, it's all going to be Creative Commons, whichever version, attribution, I can't remember. But yeah, no, it's all open source stuff. Yeah. So so thanks for that point about the, you know, the type of environment that you're in, and you're linking it to
The English curriculum, the requirement for students to undertake an inquiry-based project. So it's like every year, year 7, year 9, they're required to do it. And it just aligns really nicely with this content. But I feel like if you wanted to scale this and get it connected to the curriculum, that would be the way to do it.
No, yeah, that's I know that, but I'm just thinking about what you said about the contradiction with what we're saying in the idea that facts cannot be unbiased.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Even within a library, you should be reading multiple sources, information changes.
Yeah.
I think that level of information, like I covered it in the curriculum in year 7, if it's scaffolded correctly, it's achievable.
Okay, well, maybe we should stay in touch and we can run some things by you, because it sounds like you've got some great ideas about that. So it'd be good to continue the conversation. Yeah.
You've got 2 more.
Yeah. Sorry, who?
On there,
You again. You're running out of you've had like 5.
So I want to yeah, I see the physical reaction. So I want to
No, I'm joking.
So
It's good. I don't want to be the humiliation of the one guy who finishes 20 minutes ahead because nobody's interested. So please fill the space.
So I want to you asked for some feedback on your out there kind of proposals, the Thai martial arts.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say, I almost said at the beginning that Tim and Rob were going to do a demonstration of karate versus Muay Thai, but they didn't, you know, I didn't get a chance to say that. I'm joking. You're talking about your son. You were talking about your son. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess I was just wanting to know a bit more why you think that's going to help in this situation, because it's, yeah, I was going to bring in that, you know, karate anecdote, because, you know, I did that for a while. you don't, it's hierarchical, you just do what you're told. And so how is that how does that align with this sort of critical kind of question?
No, it's not it's actually a different issue. This is more about polarization and, well, actually not even polarization, but what was the thing? Sorry, toxicity. Yeah, it's about toxicity. It's how you relate to the opposing point of view, and it's about gender equality as well, because you have men and women, girls and boys that can train together. It doesn't really matter what your gender is, as long as you're skilled and you're respectful. That's what matters. So it's more about trying to have a common kind of ideal or discourse that we can all adhere to, and that's, you know, based on physical ability in some respect, but also on values. And I think that's what's missing a lot from, and, you know, young guys these days, you know, it's hard because some of them accept the fact that, okay, you know, we must be equal with women, but it's presented as a loss, and they kind of have to deal with that and the compensation that people like Trump and the Andrew Tate or whatever his name is offer is sort of over the top compensation. And I'm saying, well, there's other ways, and it's not addressed in contemporary progressive discourse because it's seen as inherently fascist to be interested in that kind of thing. And I think we're just leaving the territory completely open to these cretins, you know, and we should actually be engaging on that territory and proposing some better morals than what they're proposing, because that's all there is at the moment for young guys. And that's really sad, you know. And I talk to some people who say, yeah, but there's some progressive influences, you know, they talk about eating well. I say, yeah, eating well is great, but we need a little bit more than just eating well. Yeah.
So with the course that, so I think the first step is telling people to look up reliable sources. And but if you find reliable sources as, you know, ABC, I mean, I think we can do it, but I do think that a lot of the new, most dangerous, right? So it really depends.
Okay, but it's a question of average. So, I mean, I come from a tradition of critical media studies that sees the corporate media as propaganda for the oligarchs that rules, right? And that's true. And that used to be the left-wing critique of Herman and Chomsky and the propaganda model that started in the 80s. But that has been now completely recuperated by the far right, who now say the mainstream media, and, you know, this is, you know, how the role of populism in blah, 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 displacing that target to, you know, the other and the immigrant and all that. Okay. But on average, you know, if you look at 100 stories on New York Times, 100 stories on the BBC, and then you look at 100 stories on the, you know, whatever, Breitbart, Epoch Times, or whatever, you know, how many are going to be factual, how many are going to be completely ludicrous, and how many are going to be in the middle? And I think you'll still find that on the BBC and New York Times, you know, you'll get 80% factual, you know, 10%. Then the question of bias and deconstruction of the bias is the more nuanced questions of media literacy. But once again, it's about having a foundation that everybody can agree on. This is how we do it. And at some point, I also thought we could use Wikipedia to be an educational tool. Like if you wanted to reach out as a conspiracy person, we talked about, you know, how do you deprogram somebody who's a conspiracy believer? The only way to do it is to earn their trust, right? Like they think that you're going to help them, but you're not out to get them. So there has to be somebody in their family or a friend who they can actually believe in. And I actually thought you could use Wikipedia as a tool to sort of say, right, what do they say? What is it based on? Well, this is the article they're basing it on. Why is this, you know, just try and sort of unspool that thread. I mean, sorry, I'm just going on a tangent, but you see what I'm going at? I mean, we have to have some kind of common understanding, and it's true that, you know, mainstream media is biased for sure, but when it comes to question of veracity, you know, probably still better than the alternative, let's say.
I can't say trust. I felt not enough.
No, but I mean, he's talking about the BBC. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's about how you. No, but it's about you know, having transparency. If there's a mistake, you correct it. That kind of, you know, that's sort of trying to apply the same scientific process, you know, sort of journalistic version of that into, you know, into media. So
There are two things. Beginning, by the way, we live in a democracy, so we can't talk about mainstream media. But two things. One, we talk about incompetence, speed, lack of professionalism. Like this morning, Sky UK News would keep having graphic about RFK's opposition to fluoridation. That was the exact spelling. So incompetence because of speed and everything else. But the thing that I think this whole workshop needs to really focus on is so much misinformation comes from the organised right, and there are three people I can think of who actually make a contribution in different ways. Following on the matter of extremism, your colleague Josh Roos, who was on Streets, Kaz Ross in Tasmania, also, because as we know, we think about that Christchurch guy, he'd been reading all the stuff about the grand replacement and all the rest. So extremism often has got an underlying set of ideas or a discourse behind it. But the other thing is the organised middle right, and the most important researcher I think in Australia is Lucy Hamilton, who mainly publishes in Pearls and Irritations and rather than academic articles. And she's written about groups like CPAC, the Conservative Liberal Action Conference, and one is American, the network, and Erode is the conference of Vicky Burkhardt. There are lots and lots of right groups are actually organised. So that is where disinformation is coming from. The IPA, the Centre for Independent Studies, but all these others, many of them linked with the Americans, some linked with Orban. So we actually have, that is the context of which deliberate misinformation is coming from, even though it's very popular with people who want to
There's so many more organisations in town.
She follows that, most of the stuff. Lucy Hamilton, I recommend you to Google Lucy Hamilton.
So there's someone online as well, Susan Fair.
Hi.
come in, Susan.
Yeah, good, thanks. Great presentation. Very interesting. First, look, I've got a question, but first I'll make a comment. When you talked about, you know, divisive language earlier on, I've noticed also in mainstream media pensions to use the word smashed. And to me, it's quite an aggressive word. So it's used for anything ranging from records being smashed, people getting smashed, you name it. And I just think we can do better. But anyway, just a comment. I'm going to get into my question. Now, JD Vance made a statement at the US election campaign rally that it's the media's responsibility to fact check in order to shift the blame from dangerous and patently false claims about Haitian immigrants killing and eating pets that resulted in significant safety consequences for the town of Springfield. The rumour emerged from one Facebook post by a woman who presumed much and found her missing cat in the basement instead. This was prior to the Republican Senator Marjorie Taylor Greene posting equally, astonishing misinformation about hurricanes and the causes of them. She blamed the Democrats for manipulating the weather through the use of cloud setting technologies. Now, I'm getting to the question in a minute. This type of information has resulted in threats of real harm to meteorologists. Conservative politicians in Australia would be emboldened by the election win, and I know that we want to be as partisan as possible in reaching as many students as possible and adults in terms of the road to media literacy. And we'll have learnt from Vance that making up stories is okay. That is, politicians in general will have learnt a lot from what he says is okay, to make up stories that aren't true, and is putting the onus on the media to sort it out, knowing full well that it's resource intensive for respective agency experts and journalists to accomplish. and where publics can't all be assumed to have the time for extensive fact-checking. My question to all this is, are we looking at the most useful geopolitical context for media literacy programs here in Australia? Or are we focusing too much on a relatively stable home front when politicians and their strategists are watching and learning from overseas examples like Vance and what they get away with?
Thank you. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a member of the House. She's not a senator.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, so the geostrategic environment that we're focusing on is what, according to you, sorry? And can you just clarify what we should be focusing on instead? I'm a bit confused.
I'm just wondering, because it's just the implications of false information. If people run with it, it presents safety concerns for, like in the case of the Springfield town that had schools go into lockdown because of misinformation that was promoted by a political figure. And thankfully it was fact-checked at the actual election debate. But I just think to myself, they know they're pushing out all this misinformation at a rapid speed. And it just becomes unsustainable to be fact-checking all the time like this.
Okay, all right. So, well, I mean, you know, a lot of the research into misinformation does come from the US. And the US is a lot more polarized than Australia for, you know, lots of reasons, such as, you know, we've already mentioned compulsory voting, but there's a very strong public sector media here. You know, there's, these have moderating influences on the politics here. That said, it's arguably the case that during the voice debate, the debates leading to the voice referendum, there's a lot of misinformation circulating. And I was especially struck by the AEC's brochure, which was delivered to every household in Australia, and where the case against the voice said that it would create legal uncertainty into the, you know, governance of Australia, because you know, it would be a new kind of mechanism. And it was always meant to be a purely consultative body. So it would have no legal power to change anything. So, but that was in the official document that was sent out by the AEC. So that tells you that there's a problem in terms of how political discourse is allowed to say things that aren't true. But then if you try and stop them, what's happened in the United States is that there's been an organized assault on fact-checking organizations. They have been threatened, they have been harassed, they have been dragged in front of parliamentary commissions. And so they took a much less active role in this election than they did in 2020, for example. But I don't see any alternative to having some kind of correction to false information. Otherwise, we just accept that anything goes and people can believe what they believe, and it doesn't matter what's real and what's not real. I don't think that's possible to do for a democracy, because then you don't have any informed debate anymore. So yeah, I don't see any alternative to keep doing some kind of fact checking. I don't know what other people think.
Well, absolutely. But the point I'm trying to make is maybe we should incorporate some of the more, well, I mean, we have got the voice example too. And I noticed on the AEC information, the no vote, even to presentation, was, I think it was all in bold or capitalized. It just was more prominent than the information about voting for yes. And I thought immediately, as just a casual observer or, you know, an interested citizen, that it seemed biased. But what I'm basically getting at is maybe even in schools, in high schools and that, if we focus too much only on, I don't know whether we do focus only on the Australian context in these programs. And that's basically what I wanted to know, because I think there's some rich material out there going on with what's happened.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, no, okay, that's a good point. But yeah, look, I think news is global now, and we can possibly, refer to other examples, but, we're only, once again, you have to be as inclusive as possible. I'm really conscious of trying to deflect any kind of criticism, and to make this acceptable to the wider community, you have to reach the people who might not like it in the first place. So you have to be careful not to, so, some people might think it's a bit wishy-washy, but I just think we have to be, as inclusive as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying now. I mean, look, I did a study of COVID misinformation amongst health professionals in Australia a couple of years ago, and we had a population of thousands of accounts on Twitter, and we whittled it down to 600 or 700 people that we knew were actual people who were health professionals, because we checked against professional registries and so forth. And then we sort of measured, to what extent they were spreading myths and facts about COVID. And most of the, all of the misinformation and disinformation was coming from overseas, from America, and it was just being retweeted. So definitely, it's coming from overseas more. So I see what you're saying, and when we have a discussion of misinformation, disinformation, there's no boundaries to it. So yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Susan?
Yeah, I was going to say that, I think there are a lot of different approaches to medical literacy, and a very approach that I like a lot is curricular literacy, like platform literacy, and they have a whole approach there developed that's really focused on community and equity and justice. So, we get these approaches and they're not mutual, and very clear about that. And I think, the National Association of Community is very clear that they're a broad umbrella. But I do agree with you that for a school, it is really important that you're not going to do trust. I don't think it's about a way to think that process that can give confidence. And we know that children and adults don't have that confidence. It's about giving them enough that they can feel confident and information. So I agree with you on that. And we're starting to see maybe we should become part of the website by conservatives in the US.
Yeah, we're trying to nip it in the bud kind of thing by having this. The great advantage of lateral reading is it does seem to escape the kind of accusation of partisanship, because it is this sort of focus on source credibility, which kind of, until recently, science was a relatively non-controversial topic. But as we've seen with the discussion of the hurricanes yesterday, any kind of institution that tries to promote scientific facts is now being challenged, whether it's meteorologists or journalists or scientists or anybody. So yeah, we're not there yet in Australia, thank God. So that's why we're trying to, yeah. Okay.
That's terrific. It's right